We have today New York's native and hybrid grapes. I'm going to share our presentation. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody should have that up there. Fantastic. Native and hybrid grapes are deeply rooted in New York State history and produced in nearly all of the state's major AVAs. The unique local flavor needs to be better understood and explored. With climate change and sustainability top of mind, we believe that the potential of these grapes to be infinite. And with the flight today, we hope to show the varying styles, approaches, terroir, and flavors that make New York natives and hybrids so special. Chris, thanks for joining me for this one. We got 60 minutes today, and we've got 4 wines. We've got a lot of grapes to talk about, and so we're going to get right into it. Let's start here with our New York State map. Again, just to quickly reinforce our state geography and our major regions, with the exception of Long Island, that is planted to almost exclusively Vitis vinifera. Native and hybrid grapes are of historical and current relevance to all of New York State's AVAs. Given our location on the globe, we do work within a marginal climate, as we've seen with some of the troubles over the last week in many of our regions, with a bit of late season frost. Grapes that are designed for cool climate viticulture have never been so important. And so I think we've got a lot to chat about today. And so we're going to get right in with our native grapes. And so grapevines grow in many places along the eastern coast of America. In fact, when the Vikings landed in now what is New Brunswick, Canada, around the year 1000 BC, they named the area Vinland. These native grape species have been used to produce wine for hundreds of years and continue to be used today. Now, much of the native grapes on the east coast of the United States were muscadine grapes, which is the species Vitis rotundifolia. And it was from the muscadine variety Scuppernong that North America's first wine was produced in 1562 by French Huguenots in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places. Fast forward 267 years into 1829, when the first grapevines were planted in New York's Finger Lakes region by Reverend William Warner Bostwick. Now, by this point, Jamestown, Virginia had produced wine from wild native grapes that was documented in 1609, but it was considered to be overly grapey and too acidic. From there, you've got various attempts to make wine from vines imported from Europe, from our Vitis vinifera species, but those attempts also failed. Vitis vinifera could not withstand the climactic rigors and disease pressure of the East and was not resistant to the phylloxera root louse. Now, in New York, of course, these native wild grapes, they were here first. They formed the backbone of the early New York wine industry. Native varieties, majority of which are Vitis labrusca, came into use when it became apparent that European vines lacked the disease resistance and winter hardiness to survive. When we talk about these grapes a lot, there's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit. It's called foxy. I don't like this term. We wrote a very wonderful reference guide, which I hope folks have downloaded from the NewYorkwines.org website. And I only mention this term foxy once, and it is a quote from my friend, Dr. Jamie Good. And he wrote, "Native grapes have a distinctive flavor," and this is described as foxy, but the term was originally used to describe the fondness that foxes have for the grapes from Vitis labrusca, which is the American species, rather than any resemblance between the wines and the smell of foxes. And so let's just stop using that, take that word out of our vernacular when talking about these grapes. We've got unique local flavor here. And again, it's something that should be celebrated. So the overwhelming majority of New York's native plantings are used for the production of grape juice and jam. And when made into wine, their flavor often mimics the experience of these everyday products. Again, truly local flavor. I live in London now, and there is no Concord grape jelly. I mean, my peanut butter and jellies have never been the same for the last 7 years. I've even stuck a jar or two in my suitcase when I come back from the States, because you miss that local flavor. And so, you know, when someone that's not necessarily from the Northeast United States, that are used to Concord grape juice and jam and Welch's and all these things, these wines don't have this baggage, right? These wines don't have this predisposition towards these flavors, and so they're just unique, and it's no more unique than I'm trying to think of the name of the one from Greece that uses the pine resin. Oh my God, it's not Chris. What's the name of the wine from Greece that uses the pine resin? Help me out.
If you hadn't asked me, I would have been fine.
Oh gosh, it's gonna come to me in like an hour after we're done. But anyway, truly local flavor. Okay. And so I think the big takeaway is that today, improvements in viticulture, winemaking, and technology have greatly improved the quality and drinking of these wines. So Chris, hop off mute. I got some questions for you. I'm going to pick your brain a little bit on our native grapes.
All right, ready to go.
Chris, which native grapes do you work with now, if any?
Well, we work with quite a few, actually. The winery's located on an old grape farm, started in 1951, so we have a lot of carryover varieties. We have a lot of vinifera and hybrids, but we still have some of the original plantings from 1951 still producing grapes. That would be Concord and Delaware. We had a Catawba vineyard. We tore it out, but we're leasing land where we have another Catawba vineyard. Niagara. I also use from a local farm, Ives. I don't know if you've heard of Ives. It's kind of similar to Concord. I think that's it on the native varieties, but that's a pretty good handful of native varieties we work with.
For sure. And that's really exciting that you have those old plantings. I think that's something that is often overlooked when we talk about these, heritage natives and hybrid varieties. Some of these plantings are going back to the mid, 20th century. And that should be celebrated, that old vine viticulture. My retail business here in the United Kingdom is a member of the Old Vines Conference. And so old vines are always top of mind for me. And I'd be curious, how do those older vines, does the yields drop the same way we see with elder vinifera vines? Are you getting more unique characteristics out of the grapes? Just a little bit of insight would be awesome.
So I would love to say that Old Vine Concord is something that is distinctly different from, say 5-year or 6-year-old vines. I don't think that we see that. The tonnage, it does drop down just a little bit as the vine settles in. But they're not like Old Vine Zinfandel where you have these, 6-inch vines, 6-inch in diameter vines coming up out of the ground, head pruned, because we renew the trunk of the vine every, I don't know, whenever it's necessary. So because winter damage and things like that, although they're pretty resistant, eventually the larger trunks will start to crack, and the flow of nutrient up and down the vine slows. And so productivity is maintained by bringing up a renewal. It's still the same plant because it's coming off of that same root stock, but eventually we'll cut that old trunk out, and when the new one is trained up. And that's how you keep a good, healthy, productive vineyard in these vines for, well, what are we looking at? 70 some years. Still
cool.
Same vineyard, same vines, but we do renew the trunks.
Mm-hmm. And so not necessarily based on vine age, how do the varieties handle the Finger Lakes climate?
Well, it's pretty spectacular. I mean, when everybody thinks about, sustainable agriculture, these vines have to come into the conversation because they evolved here, and so they can handle our climate. They can handle the pests. Of course, we're always importing new pests here to add to the challenge, and the other environmental challenges that are presented by upstate New York. These vines have evolved here so they can handle it. So the inputs are a lot less, and I think they're always going to be part of the viticulture here. And I think that we're also seeing an expanding audience for these vines as the newer generation of wine drinkers are saying, there's more than Chardonnay and Cabernet out there. And we had a group of Psalms up here from New York City recently, and I didn't, just out of habit, I start pouring them, Riesling and Chardonnay and Cab Franc and Gewürztraminer, and they start asking, hey, I want to taste, Concord and Delaware. I mean, and hybrids, they're very open to these wines and interested in these wines. And I got to get used to that fact, because the older generation of wine drinkers and Psalms that came up here didn't show the least bit of interest in them. So I didn't even attempt, but I think there's a much more open-minded mindset surrounding these grapes now.
Yeah, I think we're moving kind of a generational shift. I think particularly in the trade, in the hospitality sector, where again this kind of old New York baggage, and I get it. These grapes were not producing really world-class wines at the time. We didn't have the technology, again, the information that we have now. And so when other vintners came in and really started to drive the vinifera story, these hybrids, these natives, they were a nuisance, right? But they don't have to. We don't have to carry that over to the new generation. I don't think the trade and and professionals are necessarily carrying that same weight around on their shoulders when it comes to these. And so I think we should be celebrating them.
Well, Dan, I just want to add one little element here. It's we here in the present, we assume that the mindset that exists today has always existed. And that's not really the case. There was a time back when Nicholas Longworth was growing catawbas along the Ohio River, and it became the most popular sparkling wine in the country. And it was big business. And at some point, he actually accused New York City restaurants of refilling his empty bottles with cheap French champagne. And so, the mindset wasn't always that vinifera is king. It's just where it is today. That doesn't mean it's always going to be that way going into the future too. And so I think as we develop, good vinifying techniques, and also just the mindset of what people are going to like, we don't know what they're going to like in 5 years. And I'm surprised, all the time at what people are more interested in, because I get stuck in that mindset. What was true yesterday is still going to be true today. And that's not always the case.
Great point. Our man Rick from Rooftop Reds threw us a lifeline. It's Retsina. There we go. Gun to my head. Forget it. Wouldn't have worked out. Just some quick kind of notes on Delaware and Concord before we press on. Delaware is a white native grape. You can see it's got some pigment in the skins there, which can be played with, of course. It is a labrusca variety with unknown parentage and thought to have a significant Vitis vinifera component in the background. So maybe some ancestry there. Viticulture, North American variety, cold, hardy, and vigorous, but susceptible to fungal diseases. Delaware produces moderate yields of red grapes in small compact clusters that maintain high sugar and acidity at harvest. Delaware is used for producing dry, sweet, and iced wines, but is prized for its use in sparkling wine as well. Unlike other Vitis labrusca grapes, Delaware does not have this distinct grapey flavor or grape jelly flavor. Delaware wines are light pink to white in color with a spicy fruit aroma. And then acreage, based on our 2011 survey, had just under 200 acres, 168 acres across the state, with the majority of that planted in the Finger Lakes, about 113 acres, give or take. Chris, anything you want to add on for Delaware?
Yes. So I know that the acreage of Delaware has been going down a little bit, and that's partly because it's what we call kind of a biennial response, where one year you have a really big crop and the next year you got diddly squat on that vineyard. It's not necessarily a 2-year cycle, but it does happen a lot, and they're kind of disappearing. But I frankly, we use quite a lot of Delaware.
Yeah, tell me how you use it. What are the applications?
We make a rosé for it's a blend that we use in with Concord. And like you noted, it doesn't have that distinct, it's distinctly grapey in its own way, but it's not methylanthanolate grapey, which is what Concord identifies with, but it's more perfumey. and I make a sparkling wine for a Little Clover, which is my sister-in-law's label. And it makes a beautiful Spumani style sparkling wine. And but we blend it with Concord for our Abbey Rose. And what it does is it adds this perfumey note, and it just softens the Concord out, and they make really good blending partners. But yeah, we grow a number of acres of Delaware, and I make a really nice rosé for another winery that's fairly dry that we use the Delaware for.
Cool. Great. And on to our Concord, which doesn't really need much of an introduction, but we have origin of Eastern North America. It's believed to be 100% labrusca and is primarily cultivated for the production of juice and preserves. Concord is cold hardy, disease resistant, pest resistant, and productive. This North American native variety ripens in late to mid season, producing medium clusters of blue-black grapes. Concord for vinification, typically pressed to extract color for sweet red wines, or pressed without skin contact to produce juice for sparkling wine production. Concord wines are usually finished with more than 1% residual sugar and as much as maybe 10% for sweet dessert wines. It does have the prominent grapey aroma that we're all familiar with, identical to the flavor of Concord grape jelly. And I mean, the numbers here are pretty intense. We've got 18,000, nearly 19,000 acres planted in the state. Now, these are the 2011 numbers. Lake Erie leads that by far. They've got over 16,000 acres. Finger Lakes just over 2,000 acres. And again, you know, not a huge player in terms of vitification and winemaking, but important for our grape growing and our grape growing industry nonetheless. There's big money behind you know, all of these acres of fruit, which drives innovation and research and all that kind of good stuff. Chris, any other comments?
When we've messed around with Concord quite a bit, and we've done some pretty cool things with it. One thing I can tell you is that you know, how you press Concord or extract the juice is so important to the way the wine turns out. We've fermented it on the skins. We've had it hot pressed, and we cold press it. The hardest process is cold pressing it, because they really are very high pectin and very hard to press and get any kind of yield. So it's a long press cycle, but it makes, unfortunately, of course, that is the best way to make a very nice, beautiful, aromatic, fruity wine with Concord. And so that's the method that we use. Hot pressing makes this, I would say, the second best, and gets a lot of color. And then fermenting on skins, in my mind, makes too strong and a flavor with a kind of a coarse finish. So you know, how you press the Concords is really important to the way the wine turns out and the elegance that you can actually have with that grape.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think you'd be silly not to try your hand at making a good Concord wine, you know, and just because of I'm sure the price of the grapes is also pretty good, generally speaking, and so you know, we've seen a lot of really fun experiments and fun wines that, you know, are absolutely worth bottling and sharing. So Concord, keep up the good work. Okay.
I would add, Dan, I just wanted to mention that we also make an ice wine out of Concord. That was an experiment that got kind of its fan base right from the early get-go, and now most years we'll make, you know, 600 to 700 gallons of Concord ice wine called Borealis.
Take my money. I'm on board.
It really transcends the grape.
Yeah. So we've got a slide here dedicated to Catawba. And I put it in between talking about natives and talking about hybrids, because I always find the rules on how we categorize these things very interesting. You know, Catawba is a grape that was found growing wild in Eastern America, Eastern North America. You know, researchers believes that it is a cross, a hybrid of Vitis vinifera and labrusca. The Vitis vinifera is believed to be semi-on, but I've never actually seen anyone say that they have proved that is the vinifera grape that has helped create this one. And so I don't know, is it a native grape? Is it a hybrid grape? I think, if it's found growing wild along a riverside, I think that says to me this is an American grape. This is native. And then you look at your parentage and you have hybrid. So I put it in the middle. How does that make you feel, Chris?
Well, I would say traditionally we've always considered it just an American or a Vitis labrusca fully. But we all want to put something in boxes and categorize it, but I don't think that's important. It's definitely a distinct characteristic that the grape has aromatically, very grapefruity and spicy. And it's I think it is absolutely one of the nicest of the labrusca grapes to work with. It presses off easily. It makes very pretty wine, and sparkling wine, of course, it has a long history of sparkling wine. It can be a little tougher in the cellar to deal with because on cooler years, it ripens very late. I mean, this is the latest ripening of the labrusca grapes, I believe. And usually it's the last of the labruscas, end of October that you're picking it. I picked it into November before. It has high acid, but it'll have significant sugars up to 22% to 23, even some years, percent sugar, natural sugar in the grape. And you like to see that because that usually means it's been a long enough season that the acid has time to come down, but it's that higher acid also makes it a really nice choice for sparkling wine.
Yep, and that's great because we're going to that's going to be the first wine of our flight is your sparkling Catawba. So just give a couple of quick facts before we press on. And so we've got again winter hardy and vigorous, producing moderate yields of reddish pink grapes. And they say they have labrusca slip skin, so the skin will slip off and leaving your pulp of the berry intact. It ripens late and requires a long growing season. And so very popular. Again, you mentioned Nicholas Longfellow from the Ohio River Valley, working with these in the late 18th century. I'm sorry, no, 1800s.
And it was Nicholas Longworth.
Oh, Longworth. See, geez.
Yep, that's all right.
Nicholas Longfellow? Did he write a book or something that?
No, it wasn't Nicholas, but yeah, Longfellow was the poet, right?
Okay, so I'm just wrong on all fronts, but that's good. We covered this in our New York intro session, the first one, where we talked about how popular the Catawba sparkling industry was back then, especially because at that time Europe was also dealing with phylloxera too, and so they needed to get their wine from somewhere, and the Ohio River Valley was it. So, yeah, great.
Yeah. So Dan, Longfellow said he wrote a very long poem, and one of the excerpts was about Longworth's Catawba, and he said, "Very nice in its way is the Verzenay, or the Sillery, soft and creamy, but Catawba wine has a taste more divine, more dulcet, delicious, and dreamy."
You are far and away the best person that we could have possibly picked for this session. Thank you for that. And now that you said it there's a reason these names were mixed up in my head. I'm not completely daft, but I appreciate it. That was great. I didn't know we were going to get a poetry reading. So our hybrid grapes, we are referring to a crossing, accidental or deliberate, between two species of grapes. Many of the hybrids used in New York today were developed by the French, and for this reason, the category is often referred to as French-American hybrids. However, many of the most popular varieties grown today are the result of North American breeding programs from the University of Minnesota, Cornell, and others. These grapes have been proven at experimental vineyards across the state, and with that in mind, some producers refer to the original French-American hybrids as heritage or heirloom varieties. And so I've got some more just kind of general hybrid notes before we get into some of the major players, and then we're going to watch a short video and move into our wine flight. Hybridizers efforts were attempts to develop new grape varieties, crossing vinifera varieties with a hardier disease and pest-resistant North American species. These horticulturists made thousands of crosses and created hundreds of hybrids, which a handful eventually became viable commercial producers. And we'll talk a little bit about one of the newest ones in just a minute. Hybrid varieties were important in the United States for the first half of the 20th century, with improved rootstocks, insecticides, and fungicides permitted, ushered in the return of vinifera varieties to most vineyards. Simultaneously, a drive to improve the overall quality of American-grown European varieties promoted the elimination of these vines considered to be of marginal quality. And so in the reference guide, you'll see couple of charts of kind of vinifera plantings versus hybrid plantings, and they've kind of switched roles over the last 30 years or so in terms of growth. But again, they still absolutely remain important today. And again, our American viticulture would not be where it is today without hybrid grapes bridging our past to our present. And as we said, they may be the future. Vinifera varieties, this is a quote from Dr. Jamie Good. The vinifera varieties we all know and love aren't very sustainable. He wrote in a 2020 VinePair article. He said, to keep disease at bay, vineyards need to be sprayed with copper, sulfur, or modern fungicides. And this is leading wine growers to explore the potential for working with hybrids that carry natural resistance to these fungi. We showed this flight to Jamie and a group of London trade at the end of January, and they were all very favorably received, which is great. So moving on. We've got two of our primary hybrid grapes, Cayuga White and Traminette. We'll run through these quite quickly. And so for Cayuga White, it was developed at Cornell University, introduced in 1972, and it is developed from the crosses of Vitis labrusca hybrids, Schuler and Seyval Blanc, so a hybrid of a hybrid of a hybrid. Principal AVA is the Finger Lakes. Early ripening, winter hardy, disease resistant, and is one of the most productive hybrid varieties grown in the United States. Can be used to produce fresh and fruity wines with a residual sugar, or dry oak aged wines, or even sparkling wines. Typically made into single variety, but can also be blended. And flavor wise, we're talking green apple and cotton candy aromas when it's on the sweeter side. Otherwise medium bodied wines with balanced acidity, and acreage in 2011 just shy of 400 acres, the overwhelming majority of which is in the Finger Lakes. Traminette, which is one of my favorite hybrid grape varieties, developed in the University of Illinois in 1965 and released in Geneva in the Finger Lakes in 1996. It is a cross of the French-American hybrid Johannes Seve 23.416 and the German Vitis vinifera Gewürztraminer. It's always fun when they don't have fancy names. They just have codes and numbers. It adds to the mystique. And so Traminette, late budding, late ripening variety, shares some of the same flavor characteristics as Gewürz, vigorous, but not overly fruitful, both cold hardy and disease resistant. Can be made in dry or sweet styles, sometimes finished with residual sugar to balance its natural high acidity, and shares some of the distinct tropical fruit, floral, and spice aromas of Gewürztraminer. Just about 140 acres as of 2011 survey, 31 of which were in the Finger Lakes, a bit more in the Niagara Escarpment. And I think I've tasted some very, very enjoyable wines from this grape. I think it does share those Gewürztraminer characteristics in a really fun way, and they make really joyful wines. We've got Vignoles, Seyval Blanc, Vidal Blanc, and Frontenac. Won't spend too much time here. Seyval Blanc, hybrid grape, primarily grown in the Finger Lakes and the Hudson Valley. Seyval Blanc typically has aromas of apples, citrus, and melons, and often resembles Sancerre from France's Loire region. And some barrel fermented versions will resemble Fumé Blanc. Vidal Blanc is a cross between Uni Blanc and Rayon d'Or. It is a hardy, thick-skinned grape, thrives in even the coldest wine-growing regions. Flavors of honeysuckle and pear complement candied fruit and citrus flavors in the wine. It can be made in a variety of styles, from dry, crisp to late harvest and ice wines. Excellent Vidal Blanc ice wines floating about there if you could find them. Vignoles, which we have the pleasure of tasting later today on our flight. Light-skinned hybrid grape variety, first bred in France, but now grown mainly in the Finger Lakes, as well as Missouri and a handful of other Midwestern U.S. states. It is suited to cold continental climates. Late budding and early ripening helps it to avoid frost risk. Moderately cold hardy, and the small, thick-skinned grapes are highly susceptible to botrytis. Again, good one for our dessert wines. High acidity and sugar levels, again, leading towards dessert wines. And if it is cold enough and you get some ice fine, it can be done. developed, and then Frontenac, last but not least, is a red hybrid developed in the University of Minnesota and introduced in 1996, crossing from an interspecific hybrid and a cold hardy selection of Vitis riparia. Principal AVA is the Finger Lakes. There's about 40 acres of it around the state. Vigorous, cold, hardy, disease-resistant hybrid. Loose clusters of small, dark, highly acidic berries develop high sugars. Used in production of red wines and fortified wines, and characteristics of red fruit flavors of cherry and red currants. This was a very quick, very dirty introduction of these wines. We wish we had more time. All of these are profiled in the reference guide, along with 12 additional hybrid grapes in the appendix of the guide. So don't hesitate to get in on there. We've got Marquette coming up at the end of our flight as well, and so I'll save that. Chris, I'm going to show us a short video. You'll probably recognize some of our Finger Lakes friends for this one. Let's get our video going here. Okay, everybody should be able to see that. Here we go.
Hybrids are the backbone of our business, and they have been even before the inception of Bowling Hill. This, where we're standing right now, was an experimental farm for the Taylor Wine Company in 1958 for hybrids.
We recently launched a new line of wines called Uncharted Terroir, and we specifically trademarked that name and are putting it out there because we wanted to instigate a conversation about how climate change is changing terroir, how you can now literally taste climate change in the wines of the world. And we also really wanted to celebrate our regionally adapted, climate resilient hybrid grapes, and really, push the envelope and see, if we dote on our Cayuga, if we dote on our Chambourcin, can we push those grapes into the realm of fine wine?
The goal with hybrids that we bring into this area are to have the flavor profiles of more similar to a European vinifera, but to have the attributes that allow a native grape to survive in this area.
Since 2016, we had this variety. It's just a number. It's called NY81031517. And this is actually a cross between Riesling and Cayuga. Cayuga is also a hybrid from Cornell, so it's NY81. And what they wanted to combine is like winter hardiness from the Cayuga, and then the thick skin from the Cayuga.
Having been doing this now for close to 15, almost 20 years, I've seen the elevation of some hybrids and the evolution of some hybrids. We've had a lot done in New York State, especially through Cornell University, that has pushed forward new varieties that can be done in a much more sustainable pathway. So less spray material, different materials, less disease pressure. Now it's fruits, bigger open clusters, allow for better, riper fruit that can get there without a lot of disease issues. Anything to help us get to the end line around here is essential.
Hybrids allowed you to spray less, which is good for the environment. They also survived at harsher temperatures, which again makes sense because this is New York State after all. And ultimately it led to lower prices for consumers.
We grow Cayuga and Vidal for the most part, and yeah, they take less sprays per year. They take less machinery going in and out of the vineyards per year. We have them on the umbrella canopy system, so once they're tied and suckered, it's kind of just set it and forget it, which helps with compaction. Spray materials, they're less susceptible to disease, and less traffic just for tractors in general. The less diesel you can burn, the better too. That goes along with keeping our area a little healthier.
I describe it as a Gewürztraminer Muscat and Tonnelle blended but mellowed down. We keep it a touch on the sweet side, so around 25 grams or little bit above semi-dry, and it really balances nicely with acidity in the aromatics.
Seyval is definitely, like, for us, a primary blender for a lot of our sweeter whites as well. It's related to the Trebbiano grape. So, and like Trebbiano is going to have like tons of acidity on the back end, and has this gorgeous Granny Smith apple flavor profile, light and perfect for summertime drinking.
We also have Vignole, which I tend to love. I think it's a very underrated grape, especially if you get some botrytis in there. It carries a high sugar level with a high acid content, finished in off dry style, which is beautiful, especially with some age on it.
It's always a bright salad, a tropical salad, which comes unexpected for people that are tasting it.
But once they drink them, they love them. So it's one of those things to get it in the hands of the customer and push it on them a little bit better might help the hybrid program. In my experience, I've noticed that the hybrid reds are really fun to blend with. And when people try a hybrid blend with vinifera, they're like, oh, God, I love this. And later on, you tell them, oh, there's hybrid in there, by the way. And it kind of blows their mind. So I think, hybrid reds can go a long way.
What we're seeing with climate change isn't just heat. It's extremes in both high temperatures and low temperatures. That means that we need grapes that can be able to withstand those and survive those cold winters, but also those extremely hot summers. Hybrids have been able to do that. And, they did not just stop growing hybrids in 1880. They're still developing hybrids today at the University of Cornell, in the Geneva Extension, as well as the University of Minnesota.
But it's a yes and equation. It is yes, our beautiful vinifera, yes, yes, yes. And, some years we're going to have such extreme weather, it's going to be, we're not going to have a beautiful vinifera crop, but we might have a beautiful crop of hybrid.
And we're back. Great interviews with everybody from that series. I really enjoyed that one. I think Suzanne Hunt sums it up very well at the end there. It is a yes and equation. These grapes are part of the tapestry of New York State wine, and they are different, and they should be celebrated as different. And there's room for all of it because people's palates, as we said earlier, are expanding, and it's exciting. And let's taste some wine. Chris, I'm gonna hand this one over to you. I want to give you as much time as you need to talk about this one, and then we'll try some more.
All right, thanks, Dan. I won't take too long because the taste is worth 1,000 words, so I might as well save my breath a little bit. But I'm gonna get a sample of this in my glass. Catawba, like we mentioned earlier, has been a long time base for sparkling wines, if not exclusive Catawba. In this case, this Catawba wine is not made in the Méthode Champenoise technique. And this kind of came about. Now it does grate that, and we in that format, but we do some of that and actually we have done it for ourselves as well. So there's a lot of parentheses in that sentence, but getting back to my point is that it makes sparkling wine in a lot of different ways, whether it's done Méthode Champenoise, or if it's done in Charmat, or if it's done in the way this one is, which is carbonated. It shows very nicely, but all in slightly different ways. The reason we decided to carbonate it is if you do the math, you find out the biggest expense in doing a Méthode Champenoise is going to be in labor. The bottle is handled some 40 or 50 times before it's finally ready for the shelf. And that all costs money and time. And having done that and still doing that, we decided that we needed to be able to make this wine so we could put this in the hands of the consumer at a very reasonable price, partly because it is a Native American variety. And our people are going to pay the $30 it's going to cost us to make that bottle of wine for a Native American sparkling wine. Maybe they will someday. I don't think that day's today, So we have to find a way to give them this experience without breaking the bank. Not to mention, I like to afford my own wine sometimes. So we make this wine by carbonating it. It's made about 97% Catawba, and then usually it's 1 to 3% Vincent, just to get the color where we want it. Catawba is, as you can see in the picture that Dan provided here, it's kind of a ruby colored grape. And when you press the grapes, you can end up with a little bit of a coppery color to it, which I don't find that attractive. And so traditionally a little bit of red wine has been added to bring that into the pink realm, which is much more attractive. And so that's what we do. Although we don't take any press juice for this. We make it like we were going to make a Méthode Champenois sparkling wine out of Chardonnay. We do free run juice only. For a lot balance reasons, you get fewer tannins, you get a little higher sugar. And actually with Catawba, unlike many varieties, the acid is just a little lower in the free run than it is in the pressed juice. And Catawba being an extremely high acid variety, that actually plays nicely to this wine because there's still plenty of acid. And then we only ferment it to whatever the natural sugars provide us. And in this case, that was a 10.4 alcohol. We're really not looking for a higher alcohol. But as you can see, if you know anything about making Méthode Champenois, 10.4, 10.5 is where you want that finished wine. If you're going to go ahead and add some more sugar and put it in a heavy champagne bottle, you're going to gain that other 1.5% alcohol through the fermentation in the bottle. So this is a grape that really was designed nicely for Méthode Champenois style wine. At any rate, we do use nothing but free run in this, and then a little bit of Vincent to bring up the color. I'll let you, I'm gonna let you go ahead. Does everybody have this wine, Dan? I assume to taste.
Yeah, we hope. I mean, it's a big question mark there, but people are certainly encouraged to round these up for our session today. I'm thrilled. I mean, I poured a very thick glass. It's also it's mid-afternoon here for me, and so I can get away with it. But the aromas really just jumped right out, and I kept pouring for that reason. Just the right amount of effervescence on it. The acidity is bright. The acidity is long. The acidity is gets you salivating, which is really important. And honestly, I just started kind of going through my head all the different cheeses I'd want to pair with this wine. I think it's just a really nice kind of starter for your evening. It's sessionable in terms of its alcohol. I would be going for rich triple cream styles like Briat Savran, almost very buttery brie styles. I would do lighter cheddars, farmhouse cheddars. I think would be really good. I think the prickly kind of spice off it would work really well with that. I could see this also working with blue cheese. It's got the residual sugar to kind of balance the sweet and spicy, sweet and salty from blue. Awesome wine for a cheese board, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I'm just going to give some numbers to this for people that might be interested in. The final acidity is 8.5 grams per liter with a residual sugar of 43 grams per liter or 4.3%. The pH is about 3.27. I'm reading the numbers for the 2022, actually. I see you have on the screen the 2021. But it's that lower pH that gives it such a vibrant pink color. I mean, it's almost got a neon tinge to it. And that makes it very attractive to the eye as well. And we've been doing 500 to 800 cases a year of this.
Excellent.
Hi, Dan. I would appreciate you're describing the aromatics of this wine.
So for me, the first thing I get is a confectionery quality. I get almost like a cake frosting sugar, right? And then there is something, again, it's something, there's a grapiness to it. I certainly the kind of distinct wild grape, but it's a very wild fruit. It's not, it feels almost a bit brambly, right? Yeah, and then there's just some really clean, red berries. I get some strawberries for sure. And I think on the palate, I think what's really nice is that spice that comes through. I think it's very exotic. I don't know if I could quite pinpoint it, but it's a fun journey. You get hit with a little bit of acid right at the tip of your tongue. The bubbles come over, really envelop your mouth. It's almost creamy. Texture is really nice. And then you start salivating on the sides almost immediately. And I think that's great. That gets you ready for your next bite, your next sip, so on and so forth.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice wine. Moving right along, we heard from Stephen Taylor on our video, and he talked about his love for Seyval Blanc. It is an important grape for their production, for their blends. This is not a blend. This is the bottled Seyval Blanc. This is a non-vintage wine. And I think we spent some good time. I didn't put it into this presentation because these are kind of designed to be breakout sessions after the longer Intro to New York course. And we talked a lot about the Taylor Wine Company's contribution to the wine and grape industry here in New York and in the Finger Lakes. And Bully Hill is kind of an extension of the Taylor family in that way. And their kind of legacy is these hybrid grapes. And so let's get and give this one a try. We got 11% alcohol. Swirl. Yeah, acid is ripping. It is definitely vinified dry, very little residual sugar here. On the nose, green apple, white flowers, fresh linen. Citrus for sure, but it's bright, it's lemon. Soft on the palate, but then, man, that acid gets you on every inch of your mouth, really through. And again, super fresh. I mean, this is a kind of a pool pounder. We're out on the boat on the lake. I think this wine would not stand a chance. Also, again, coming in at 11%. And honestly, there's nothing about this to me that would suggest that this is a different grape species. I think pouring it blind, it would be nearly impossible to identify as a hybrid. What do you think, Chris?
Dan, I hate to say it, I don't have that wine in front of me here, so
that's
somehow
all right.
it never made it to us, so I can't comment on that wine specifically. But having worked with Seyval some in the past, I totally agree with your evaluation that this, and there's a number of other white hybrids that if it didn't say so on the bottle, you'd never be able to guess that they weren't vinifera wines.
I think the defining characteristic here is that tart malic acid. It's green apple. It is biting into a very crisp green apple, and so that acidity calls for fatty foods. I could be working with the first thing that just popped into my head was like one of those Alsatian tarts where it's just basically heavy cream and bacon. It's just something really rich, right? Where you need that acid to cut through the fat and just kind of make the flavors pop. I think that would work really well in here. Fig and onion tart with some kind of sweet maple balsamic vibes could work really, really well here. It's a fun wine. And again, didn't spend a ton of time on the history today, but Bully Hill and the Taylor family have a big role to play within the world of hybrids. Fantastic. Let's keep going. Moving into a red wine. We have our Clover Pond Marquette Reserve from the Upper Hudson. I can't imagine many people have this one in front of them, and they're difficult to get their hands on. There's not a lot of it floating around, but this is the 2019 vintage from Clover Pond. Crack it open. Really plush fruit. Bit of pepper spice on there. Plummy, really kind of purpley plums.
It has a little bit of this kind of, I relate it to a carbonic maceration character, that kind of cranberry fruit to it as well.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, really like kind of that crunchy, like when the cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving is made fresh and it's not out of the it's not the jelly out of the can.
It's also got pretty significant ABV. I'm looking at 13.8. So is what your page says.
Yeah. Yep. 13.8 for sure. I mean, it's New York doesn't necessarily have a ripeness issue. And if your grapes are healthy, you'll certainly be able to hit this even in a region like the Upper Hudson, where you're working with pretty much the exclusive cool, cold, hardy Minnesota hybrids. And that's where this one is from. This is a University of Minnesota hybrid. The last one was a French-American hybrid, and the Sable Blanc. And so, yeah, University of Minnesota, Upper Hudson AVA. And yeah, I think it's a really, it's an enjoyable wine. It's got Merlot vibes too, for sure. Again, that really kind of rustic plum. Yeah, and we're going to do more on the Upper Hudson as we press on with our series. We'll talk a bit about it with our Hudson Valley session in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, and then we'll also have some more video materials. And I'm constantly kind of speaking with vintners up in the Upper Hudson to flesh out the information provided in our reference guide, because I think it's a region that deserves more attention. And it really is sitting on the fringe of what they can get away with cold hardy. I'll be very curious to see how they fared over the last week. Yeah. There's something really kind of dark and brooding about it too. It's like even the color, it's really dark. Keep going back to it. Something very intriguing about it. All right. Moving right along. How are we doing on time? Ooh, just about. Okay, good. So we've got one more wine. I always like doing my flights out of order. And especially when I go to trade tastings during the day, I always do my reds first and then finish with my whites and things, just to kind of keep you fresh. And especially for you guys coming at this so early in the morning, this is a nice wine to finish on. And we heard from Suzanne Hunt, and her father Art Hunt made an appearance in our Cabernet Franc video. So some more on Marquette. I'm sorry, I forgot I stuck the slide in here, but just a bit more information on Marquette. Tobacco, that tobacco note flavor was there for sure. I think that's a really smart note. Leather, yep, absolutely. And again, Finger Lakes, Upper Hudson, Champlain Valley. Do you see much of it in the Finger Lakes, Chris?
Not very much, no. But I mean, a lot of these Minnesota hybrids are really just starting to be discovered by the winemakers around here. We planted about 7 years ago some Frontenac, which I absolutely love it. For at least certain things. One, it's extremely dark, and you mentioned earlier about the high sugars. I've seen them as high as 27 bricks here, which means I don't know. It either translates to alcohol or residual sugar. We use it for our port mostly, and it makes it it's an amazing component of our port style wine. But Marquette, it is growing some around here. I think it's catching on. I certainly see it has a future. Looking at all the red hybrids, this is one of the prettier wines the Marquette makes here, and I'd definitely be interested in looking deeper into it.
Just up the road from you guys towards the north end of the lake, there's Scout Vineyards, and they're making a Marquette Nouveau, essentially in that Beaujolais Nouveau style, and it is a thoroughly enjoyable bottle.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Daniel does a great job. And you know, I mentioned that carbonic character in there. I could see like, oh, this one would be perfect for that. You know, if you treat it that way, I can see that making a fantastic Nouveau style wine.
For sure. Okay, we've got our Uncharted Terroir. This is a really fun series. Vignoles, the skin contact vignoles is absolutely one of my favorites out of the series. I also really enjoy the Chamberson that they make as well. And this wine, again, big alcohol coming at 13.9%. 2020 vintage though, really warm vintage, really long growing season. And so you can certainly get up there. This wine spends 9 days on its skins. And does give you that really quite nice nice color there. This was a big hit when I poured it in January for London Trade. Everyone kind of kept going back to it. There's a really exciting kind of honeyed sweetness to it in the mid palate, both from like a textural perspective. And you can kind of smell it right on there, that really lovely, just kind of bright wildflower honey. I found Suzanne to be an absolute wealth of knowledge when it came to sustainability, and we'll absolutely be working with her for our future sustainability sessions, and she'll make some more appearances in my video series as well. She's just brilliant. And I think it's smart. You know, I hosted a panel at the Bev conference in January, or no, gosh, January, in March, end of March of this year, and you know, we brought it up with these wines. I think that Hunt Country did a really nice job with this title of Uncharted Terroir. It's highlighting climate change, but also not shoving it in your face. You know, because as I said, yes, the climate is changing, but you know, doesn't mean people's palates are changing as quickly. And as we said, you know, climate change is not sexy. Right. But I think Uncharted Terroir, I think that actually is kind of really just intriguing. Right. And I think it absolutely starts conversation. And this is just a fun wine. You don't often see skin contact with a slightly off dry style coming around together. And I think it just plays really well. It makes for a really interesting kind of palate journey. So again, 9 days on the skins is a French-American hybrid, and then just from Hunt Country, their Uncharted Terroir embodies their family's tradition of land stewardship as they pioneer flavor identities in the Finger Lakes region and navigate the realities of an ever-changing climate to produce the highest quality wines. I think that's important. I think if we are just aiming to produce high quality wines, the grapes are going to matter less and less and less.
So Dan, I want to add that this is an extremely creative approach to vignoles. I just, you know, the skin time, which generally with whites I don't like, and we really avoid it like the plague, but vignoles doesn't have a lot of bitterness in the skin, so they didn't really pick up any of that, and it's more of a plush texture wine. You can't tell that it has 2.5% residual sugar. It's totally hidden by the acidity and the warmth of the alcohol. And this wine really is in a whole nother direction than you generally see vignoles taken around here. And it really works. It's just a fantastic wine, just with depth in the texture and the weight, and whatever the phenolics they picked up from the skins really stitches right into the whole tapestry of the thing really nicely.
Yeah, adds a nice bit of spice for sure. You know, it's similar to kind of, you know, your orchard fruit skin, right? You got a little apple skin kind of tannin quality to it, which I think is just it's really fun. It makes for a very fun journey on this wine. It's another one that's just a winner with cheese. Absolutely, that honeyed quality. I think you could play with a lot of different cheeses there. Probably do something like with sheep's milk would be really nice. Some kind of very rustic sheep's milk cheese, like an aged manchego would be really fun. Things like that. And yeah, like I said, if you want to really do deep dives with sustainability, go up and spend some time at Hunt Country and try through their entire Uncharted Terroir series, which has several bottles. And like I said, you can tell them Dan recommends the Chamberson and the Vignoles for sure. Fantastic. All right, we're just about at time, and so doesn't have to kind of spend any time here. We've been kind of having a sustainability through line throughout, and again, I think, you know, for me, the takeaway here really should be, you know, New York's strengths is lying in its diversity. One of New York's strengths, and as Suzanne said, it's a yes and equation. These are going to play a really vital role from an economics to stability standpoint, I think, for wineries. And so don't stress too much that it's a hybrid. Just try and make a really good, high quality wine with them, and you know, the wines will do the talking. I really think that's the most important part. And if we can get people, you know, in the know in terms of climate change and sustainability and things like that along the way, even better. And so just really quick, in closing, our value proposition: New York State's native and hybrid wines offer incredible value. There's no doubt about it. We boast a wide breadth of styles and varieties with our signature world-class cool climate. Fresh, lively wines, moderate alcohol, lots of flavor. These wines are largely unavailable anywhere else in the world, and they are budget friendly to the average consumer. With the overwhelming majority of our producers being small and family owned, you're getting an artisan product rooted in unique and fascinating terroir. Our state hybrid natives played an important role in our history and will continue to gain importance in our future as we continue to focus on sustainability and react to climate change. New York's cool and cold climate regions are distinctly suited for premium native and hybrid grape production, wine production. And they are produced in most of our AVAs, and even Long Island. I think it's not going to be a long time before they start dabbling, for sure. I do know that other producers do like working with them down there. They're bringing grapes in from the other regions, and so you know, don't hesitate to jump on something maybe from our friends at Channing Daughters, working with some fun hybrid grapes. And then they're fantastic with food. I mean, I threw out mostly cheese suggestions along our course today, but I think there's a lot to be explored. Chris, we had a question come through, and I thought you'd probably just be more suited than me. And it was from Susan Hearn at Suru, and she asked have we worked with La Crescent, and what do we think of it? I personally have very limited experience with La Crescent, and I wondered if you might be able to, you know, kind of comment on it.
Unfortunately, I've been out to Minnesota to speak at their conference before, and that was my introduction to it years ago. And I really was impressed with it, but I have never worked with it. I'm sure there will come a day that at least my kids will work with it. So, but I'm really not equipped to answer that one. I'm sorry, Sue.
It's all right. It's definitely one of the ones that we talk about in the guide and the appendix. But again, there's going to be some quick information there for you. And so, yeah, we'll just have to we'll have to see. Chris, thank you so much. We went just a touch over time, not too shabby, for all of the information that we cranked out. Your contributions were invaluable. I really appreciate your time, and I'm going to be paying you guys a visit on my next trip up, without a doubt. And so we'll see everybody next week. We're starting our regional series. We are back with the Finger Lakes. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day. Really appreciate it. Chris, thanks again.
My pleasure. Thanks, Dan.